what is going on with China actually vowing now to work with Russia and partner with Russia, along with the Soviet Union, or rather Soviet Union, it's the Saudi Arabians, working with China. What we're looking at now is the breakup of the global economy that was dominated by the dollar. And we're seeing competing systems beginning to emerge and fragment. That means the almighty dollar is in a vulnerable place if you're only putting your trust in that currency, because the government itself is talking about going digital. So that paper trail is going to be very, very fraught with risk. I encourage everyone to go to lancewallnau.com/Birch and begin to look at moving your 401k into that which is going to be able to hold and store value through the coming storm. I put Birch Gold at the top of my list for strategies for being able to store value so that whatever happens to the dollar in the American divine battle that we're in, gold and silver and such are actually sustaining and increasing their value all the time. You want to talk to a specialist about this? Go to lancewallnau.com/Birch, download the report, take action, be informed, and have peace of mind by doing something to prepare yourself for a boat that floats in the coming economics that we're entering into. God bless you. Let's get into our program. Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show, the show that is constantly breaking the barriers of merging together current events with the prophetic eyes to be able to see what's really going on. And we were just discussing the loss of James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, that spiritual backlash. You can count on it, a backlash after a breakthrough. That Project Veritas breaking through that Pfizer report, exposing that they're doing the gain of function research in their labs. By the way, I heard something interesting. Mussolini made the comment, not recently, of course, but right prior to his hanging in the Second World War, that totalitarian states like fascist Germany and fascist Italy work by the merging of big business and big government taking over media. So if media is under the control of big business and big government, if education is under the control of big corporations and big government, then the big government is making the money, manufacturing the arms, the weapons, and big manufacturing is doing that, working with big government with their politics of war and of domination, and they're feeding back to the interest of the money makers, the oil or whatever it is that they want to get. And it really is true that fascism is the merger of these corporations and the Uniparty or the Democratic Party and its worst Marxist elements. And so I want you guys to think about that, because look at the warfare that happened with Pfizer, getting exposed by O'Keefe. Then we have Naomi Wolf. We got to get on our show here next week. Okay. Talk about her book and the pincer movement. It was like a patent movement. The pincer movement of the Pfizer video, plus Naomi Wolf's written documentary, plus Robert Kennedy Jr.'s constant, assault. Having said that, look at what happened with the Daily Wire. To your point, off the air, you were saying, what's going on with the conservative movement? The Daily Wire, Satan is out to divide. And I don't care if you say, well, that's just like, they're not even Christian. That's the point. If you're not Christian, you're even more vulnerable because you're dealing with Satan and you don't even got intercession prayer or humility or conflict resolution or something working for you. You've got now Crowder, who's, fighting with those guys. And the issue is, what the heck were they taking this thing public over about his...
Crowder did.
About what?
Crowder took it public.
Crowder took it public. I mean, he didn't have to. He didn't have to make this personal like that.
Yeah.
But he did. And so at the end of the day, I don't care whose side you're on, Crowder was wrong for making it a public issue about the motivation of these conservatives to say, hey, if you get taken off the air because of something you say that's irresponsible, we're not responsible for funding whatever comes out of your mouth. We're responsible for the deal we make. And if you get taken off, then if you no longer can generate revenue, then we don't have the wherewithal to pay you $50, $60 million. My gosh, stop it, guys. So So yeah, you have to, Crowder has a certain responsibility for not going on a hallucinogenic magic mushroom trip and saying stuff that is going to get him taken off the air. The point is, the devil is behind the division in the conservative camp. Now you're going to have it happen further with, I was watching strangest text from Bill Mitchell the other day against Trump. I mean, I love Bill Mitchell, but I'll tell you, he's losing it. He's going off. He's slipping, going off the track.
What did he say?
Because he's so visceral in his animus towards Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump's saying bad stuff about DeSantis, and it's like Trump derangement can happen to a conservative as well. So now, once you go against Trump, that derangement hits you. I don't care who you are. You could have been a Trump supporter. Now you're a Trump. You're not just a Trump critic. You're a Trump obsessed adversary. And he's got a picture of Trump like with a clown nose on. I mean, totally not helpful because this one guy, I want you guys to all listen to this fellow. I'd like to get for an interview. I want you to make a note of this. I think my son Carl would love this guy. His I don't remember his name, but he has a thing called The Worthy House. The Worthy House is an internet publication where he evaluates books. But the guy is like a Renaissance mind. I mean, he's living off the grid. He has some background in law and business, but he's one of the most brilliant conservative thinkers. He believes the country's going to head up in a civil war, but he doesn't believe we're there now. He says and he doesn't think it's going to be the way that we think it's going to be. But he sees the culture as heading towards an inevitable fragmenting. And he, by the way, sounds like a Christian conservative who's an intellectual. But he says, he has a philosophy, no enemies to the right. And what he means by that is that the left badgers us so much that sometimes to prove that we're really objective, to prove that we're not like the dumb board doing with poor old O'Keefe there saying, we're going to show that we're not James O'Keefe's lapdog. We're not a cult of personality like the Republicans. We're not a cult of Trump personality. They'd love to shed themselves from the guy that does the rain dance and brings all the prosperity. So what this guy says is no enemies to the right, meaning it's the tendency of Christians, and I see it with the religious right, to attack us. It's the tendency of Christians to hit the easy target. It's a coward's target. It's everybody's against the right. Everyone's against conservatives. So when you pair off and start beating up on a fellow conservative, it's a weak move because you and I have far more in common together against the devil and against what the destruction of America is, then we have difference between us and our own concerns. This is the reason why I go so gentle with the whole prophetic division. I don't want to see a false spirit. I don't want to see false hope. I don't want to see false prophecy. But I'm really reluctant to draw the sword on folks that are really crying out and praying for America and love Donald Trump because I don't want to have enemies to the right of me. On the right, I want to protect them.
I think, as you're talking, and I want to share a tweet too that I just saw the other day, but this whole idea, Jesus says a house divided can't stand. And it's a true principle is what it comes down to. And so whether that's at a national level, a divided house can't stand. That's why I think the division between Republicans and Democrats is getting so strong. But now within the conservative movement, we see a real division. And like you're saying, I mean, for the board, and the Bible also talks about, how embarrassing it is when Christians sue each other, that there's no one among you that could rightly divide the conflict, that when these things are made public like this, it does a discredit to Christ. But I'm just saying, even within a movement itself, I think the principle applies even to conservatives, that it's like how embarrassing it looks when these things are being made public. What cannon fodder for the other side? Like, we don't need that. So anyways, I just, I was looking at a couple different things, and then just to make my point, and I love Marjorie Taylor Greene. I really enjoy what she stands for and everything she does. She put this tweet out the other day, and she said, we need a national divorce. We need to separate the red states and the blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this, from the sick and disgusting woke cultural issues shoved down our throats to the Democrats' traitorous America Last policies. So again, I totally agree, and I disagree with the concepts. And like you always talk about, we're in a battle of public persuasion. But the idea of divorce, I think we need to be pushing towards reconciliation. We need to be pushing towards
rationalization. When you disagree with the concepts, you disagree with the concepes that she disagrees with too, right?
Yeah, yeah. I disagree with the American Last policies, but I agree with her in that way. I don't like those policies, but the concept of a national divorce or breaking apart, right? Like we need a divorce. It's like, no, we got to move towards reconciliation. And there's more people who are moderates that agree with our worldview than there are people that disagree with it. To your point, the media would have us believe that you're in the minority. We're all in the minority thinking that, we shouldn't be having transsexuals in female bathrooms, or that transsexuals can't menstruate, or we should be spending more money when our federal budget's clearly maxed out.
It's kind of crazy, isn't it? That you've got a woke, the thing about the woke culture that's so maddening is that what are you going to do when you got that guy who's dressed up like the attorney general, who is a woman, and that's put forward as normal? I mean, it's celebrated to the point where how dare you even, criticize the fact that Levin there is not a transitioned man into a female. My gosh, it's just like, because it's a guy dressed up in a dress,
and the pressure
now looking like Colonel Sanders.
You wrote about this, but about compelled speech versus free speech. That you will make the confession, you will say the thing. It's not even, Lance, on the left anymore. It's on the right. If you don't agree, if you don't make the right confession, if you don't say the prophets are all right, then you also are a traitor. And it's just like, where is this coming from? Like, why can't we just agree to disagree at certain times? And again, there are levels to that, right? I mean, there's actual things that you shouldn't agree with. But anyways, what are you looking for over there?
I got some notes for you. You've sparked me. Now, those of you that are in the podcast and not watching, I was going through my notebook vigorously because I just came from 3 days of very intense meetings, and one of the great global economists, Mark Nuttall, trained by Milton Friedman, just commissioned George Barna, a friend of Mercedes, and fellow,
a friend of mine. He's a friend of yours.
That's true. But I mean, the data geekness that you love.
Yes, I know.
You love geeky data. She's into data.
I really do. I really admire him and his fashionable dressing sense. His bag. He's got this really dapper red bag.
Fashionable, George. He's fashionable.
George has a very dapper red bag that he carries, leather bag.
George, I want you to know the women observe those things, and thank you for bridging the gap with the millennial females. Now, here's what I want you to get. Out there in Arizona Christian University, where George is a professor, he was commissioned to do the most exhaustive study of American values in probably the last 30 years. This data is going to be useful, the crosstabs, as they say, which is you break it down into specific categories. It's not data of Christians or data of Republicans. It's American data. And you are going to be shocked at the 3,750 in-person interviews, one-on-one discussions. This wasn't done by a weird sampling of, Americans that already agree with your ideas. It's a real intentional cross-sampling with 2,000 crosstabs. That's Hispanic, African-American, gay Americans. This is America all across all sections. 72% of Americans believe in traditional family values. They believe mommy and daddy and children. They're not confused on the role. They're not going to buy the fact that we're not going to call a woman mom. We're going to get rid of Mother's Day because it's Person's Day. And going to go. 72% believe in hard work and in the separation of the government from your private life. They don't like anything that looks like government mandated, which is probably why the pro-choice argument and the pro-life argument are fueled by issues other than the murdering of babies, the way that Christians see it. Because on the left, they just don't like anyone on the right telling them what they're going to do. So, but listen to this. What are you willing to die for? The only thing the American people are willing to die for isn't really capitalism They're willing to die for their family. The family mountain, to my wife's point, seems to be the one mountain that everyone agrees is the most important. So when you have Youngkin running for governor of Virginia, and he says, it's not the government's job to tell you what we will teach your children. It's your job to be able to raise your children the way you want to. What Nuttall said to me is, that's different than saying we're against CRT, critical race theory. He said, because every politician in the midterm that tried to align with the border or the economy or the deficit or drag queen hour, if they didn't thread it through, you have the authority as a citizen to choose what you want and what's right for your children. If they threaded it through arguing with what was being taught or giving it a critical race theory label, it failed. Americans aren't really worried. I know you are. My audience is thinking about it, but the vast part of America isn't interested in CRT. You know what they're interested in? Don't you tell me I don't have I don't have authority over my little Johnny.
Yep.
Don't you tell me that you're going to tell my boy he's a girl or the girl she's a boy. You're going to educate them about things regardless of what you have to pit the government and the aggressiveness of the woke left against the interest of moms and dads. Yep. They lose every time you pit the argument there. But if you put it like, I'm a Republican and I stand for this, boo. You know why? Because like 72%, 86% says the problem in America is politics in America. They're not sold in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. I'm sorry, 86% figure is they're proud to be an American. Imagine that. Now, I want you to say this again. 86 from somewhat proud to marginally proud to very proud. Positively proud to be an American. 86%. They don't hate America. So those ignoramuses like de Blasio and Cuomo up in New York who say America was never that great to begin with. Making America great, great. Why? Why? We never were great. That totally fails. That falls deaf on the ears of the average American. It's like, they're not interested in demonizing their history because you don't like aspects of it. It's like anyone else. It has a checkered past of noble moments and flawed moments. But don't paint the whole thing through your sick psycho lens. 86% of Americans don't like the narrative that is like crapping on America. 92% said, yeah, I'm somewhat proud. Not entirely, but somewhat proud. The lowest area, though, is millennials. Millennials, sadly, have taken the brunt of the toxic poison against America. My children got it. They got it in college. I realized the biggest mistake I made was insisting that they finish college in Texas. I didn't know. I thought a college education was still important. I still had my dad and my father-in-law. Are your boys going to graduate? Yeah, I felt the pressure of an educated household. But now that I look at what they got exposed to, they got intimidated and force-fed the narrative that America is just a bad country.
Yeah. 1619 Project, right?
This is before that. This is the guy that did the Goodwill Hunting, type script writing. Oh. It had to do with the American taking the land from the Native Americans story and how we're just colonializers.
First Peoples. First Nations.
First Peoples. Whatever.
I don't know what you're allowed to say anymore and what you're not allowed to say.
65. Howard Zinn. Thank you, Carl. Yeah. Carl, why are you down there? Why aren't you up here on the platform? I'm doing the job of 3 employees. You're doing the job of 3 employees.
Which is what you meant earlier, right?
Well, I travel around and people tell me that they like Carl and they like Mercedes. You guys are developing your own brand out there. So I think Carl should be up here doing his coaching or whatever. 65% think Congress is corrupt, worse. It's, by the way, thinking your government employee is corrupt is different than thinking I don't like them. It used to be that they felt that they liked their congressman, but they felt Congress was incompetent. But now it's shifting. 66% feel that every candidate in the federal government is corrupt and in it for alternative reasons than they say. That's pretty sad, folks. The reason I'm giving you this information is that 28% of the audience identify as born again. So if you want to know how many Christians there are in America, in this very random sampling, you could say maybe we've got close to 30% of the country has heard the gospel, prayed at some point. I had an Uber driver last night, picks me up at the airport. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. He's Persian, self-identifies as Persian, which is Iranian, but he calls himself Persian. And, and he's kind of like cussing mad at the airport, trying to get through the tolls. And I just felt like, he said, I said, you're doing a lot of work with Uber. He said, I just got laid off at Toyota. He said, man, my manager gave me COVID and then fired me because I didn't meet my sales quota.
Wow.
He said, it really is. He says, I'm just having a bad day. And so the Lord says, well, tip him now. So I went and grabbed 20. I said, I want to give this to you. And I tipped him on top of that, too, on this device. So I said, I just want to bless you. And I said, I'll tell you the truth, I'm a Christian. And I just feel like Jesus wants you to know that you got a friend. He said, oh, I'm a Christian, which I wouldn't have known because he was like cussing all that stuff. I said, really? He goes, well, I haven't been walking right for 2 years. He said, but
wow,
for 2 years. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because his generation of millennials, I fear have really been whacked hard and spiritually by what's going on, which is why I love to see this revival taking place, because I got a chance to minister to him, and he played music for me. He's a guitar player, and he actually has done worship leading years ago.
Wow.
So I think that there's an undercurrent in America. 28% of Americans identify as being born again. They may not be walking with Jesus. But if this revival can move in the direction of activating the body of Christ, listen, guys, I'm serious about this. 66% in the survey say they're Christians. So what the 30% of Americans that actually are born again have to realize is that you've got an equally large group that don't know what born again is, but they think they are a Christian. This revival in America can change America. It can change America if we're willing to really take this moment, this historic moment, and see it go from the spiritual Bible colleges to the secular campuses. Because what I learned from Charlie Kirk is what happens on the campus will end up on the streets. And if we could see revival breaking out on these campuses, I believe we're going to see a sea change politically happen on the streets. But it's going to be, what Mark Nuttall says is we got to change the message, because they're not interested in the language you're using. They're threading their concerns through family and their distrust of government.
Yeah.
So
I think, too, there's an integral role of people who are currently walking with the Lord, hearing from the Lord, exercising that same level of obedience that I think you did the other night. That, I mean, how many times we were talking about this the other day, and it's like, how many times does the Lord say, hey, go pray for that person?
I'm getting so convicted,
give
folks.
that person $20, talk to this person about the Lord. And I was saying to you, and this sounds so carnal, but I'm going to be so transparent, that sometimes I just feel like, well, if I lead my hairdresser to the Lord, or if I go there, am I going to make this situation awkward the next time I'm here? Like, what if she doesn't want to receive Christ? What if she's like, what are you talking about? And so, like, sometimes those are the thoughts that like hold me back, right? Or I'll pray at my house, and I'll pray, I'll ask you for prayer. Like Liberty had COVID the other week, and you prayed for her and she got better. And so her culture is Jesus answers when we pray for healing. I mean, it's literally every time we pray.
I'm going to say this to you parents out there, and listen to me. This is your final proverb thought as we sign off the show today. This time just flew by. I learned something. I learned that if your family is in the habit of praying when there's a crisis, a problem, a sickness or something, and your children are part of it, they will never lose their belief in God. Even if they drift spiritually into all kinds of stuff, if you're a family where you pray and God answers prayer, and they know growing up that God did unusual stuff when the family prayed, you got them. Because when push comes to shove, when they're in crises, they'll turn to God, because God isn't a fiction that doesn't deliver. God is an actual personal presence that manifests. And so, but you got to just remember that. Practice your faith. Pray for things with your children. It's the best way of training them for the future. And then if they believe God answers prayer and hears prayer, That's the minimum you need. They'll call upon the Lord in the day of trouble.
And then the expectation is culturally, when you're out in public and you see people who need prayer, they will also place the demand on that and say, Mom, you should pray for that person. That's what happens. And that's what I'm talking about, that level of obedience.
All right. Well, we're going to have to land the plane right now because I've got to sign off. And but I love you all. I want you all to go to lancewallnau.com/podcast. Send me your questions. Who do you want me to interview? We're going to be doing some interviews. We're setting up some conversations. What are the subjects? I want to know what you need clarity on. What's not clear that you need clarity on? Because with clarity comes power. And believe me, God is moving right now in unprecedented ways, and the power of God is here to deliver. We'll be talking to you again tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.
You know, everybody talks about being prepared. What happens when the bubble bursts? What happens when the dollar collapses? Are you ready? Are you prepared? Do you have emergency food kits? Do you have gold and silver? I want to talk to you about something you might not have heard of yet, and it's called hydroponic gardening. And it is one of the coolest things I have secretly fallen in love with over the last 8 to 9 months. I have an entire gardening system. And let me tell you what, it's enough food not to just feed my family, but to feed my neighbors. I have 36 different types of plants growing in this thing. I have lettuce, I have beans, I have strawberries. I have so many different things. And it's just one more tool in my arsenal to making sure that I'm ready to take care of my family and my friends and my neighbors if need be. And so I want to tell you about it. It's this really cool system. It's called Let Us Grow. And if you're interested in finding out more and finding out how you can have one of these, it grows vertically. It's a hydroponic garden. You might not even know what that means. It's an entire system where it's just water-based. There isn't a ton of dirt. You don't have to worry about bugs and pests or anything like that, because you can actually do this in your home, which means you can grow plants year round. It's so cool. I just did it through the entire fall and winter. And like I said, I have just had such abundance with it. So I want you to check it out. You can go to lancewallnau.com/garden and get all of the details on the Let Us Grow system. And be sure you stay tuned, because I just put one together for the office, and it took me less than 10 minutes to put the entire system together. And it just snaps together. You fill it up with water. You give the plants their nutrients. 30 minutes per week is all you're looking at for maintenance. So I'm telling you, go check it out. I'm going to have before and afters on the screen when I'm talking about this, so you can see the type of abundance I'm talking about. Be prepared. Go to lancewallnau.com/garden to find out more.